At a priory in Midsomer, someone murders a nun. Say, how long do you think I could do this episode without saying this is a bunch of nonsense?
5 seconds?
Nailed it.
Welcome to Midsomer.
Hello, and welcome to Midsomer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show, Midsomer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Eileen Becker. Hey, Eileen.
Hey, Eric. Today we are talking about A Sacred Trust, the 7th episode of the 14th series. It originally aired October 26, 2011. It was directed by Rennie Rye and written by Rachel Cooperman and Sally Griffiths. Let's genuflect on this one.
Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer. So if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We'll still be here when you get back.
I'll be in charge of the investigation, and I'd like your permission to set up an incident room here at the Priory.
I'm sorry, but that won't be possible.
Why not?
Midsomer Priory is a house of prayer, Chief Inspector. We can't have police officers stamping around at all hours and shouting into their mobile telephones.
I can assure you we will treat the Priory with the utmost respect.
I suppose you could use the old refectory, but you'd have to observe our hours of silence.
Which are?
10 a.m. to 12, 2 to 5 in the afternoon, and 9 at night until 6 the following morning.
Perhaps it'd be best if we worked out of Corston Police Station.
In the woods at a Midsomer Priory, a couple of teens having sexy time are interrupted by a mysterious nun. They run off, but when they come back for their clothes, the gentleman, one Duncan Hendred, is missing his trousers. He organizes some of his mates to chuck bottles through the stained glass windows of the Priory Church in retaliation. The next day, D.I. Ben Jones visits the Priory to investigate the vandalism. However, Prioress Mother Julian denies him entry, saying they would rather pray for the vandals. Mother Thomas, Mother Jerome, and Sister Catherine are cleaning up the glass. Thomas and Jerome want to sell the convent's silver relics to fix the damage, but they're overruled by Julian. That night, while closing the hen house, Mother Thomas is strangled to death. Well, now they want the police.
Of course.
Of course. Jones calls in DCI John Barnaby. They are shocked that there's only 3 nuns left in the Priory. Most of them have been there for decades, receiving almost no visitors other than the local chaplain. All of them were together just before Thomas left to get murdered. The prioress says she was in the chapel for another hour after that, but Catherine and Jerome share a look that says she might not be telling the truth. Mother Jerome also tells Jones that Thomas and Julian never got on, mostly because Thomas wanted to be prioress. Barnaby talks to Catherine, who will take her final vows the following week. She came to nunning from doing postdoctorate work at Oxford. The detectives go out into the woods and find the local teen sex hotspot, complete with some sticky icky. Then they visit the chaplain, Father Behan. He is annoyed that the nuns don't listen to him. The convent was apparently founded by 17th century French aristocratic nuns who would often treat a priest like a servant, so some things never change. They can only own the land as long as nuns live on it. If the nuns leave, it reverts to the heirs of the original owner, St. Anthony Virtue. The nuns find out that their silver relics have been stolen from the safe. They had just had them appraised with a silver dealer for £60,000 before deciding not to sell. So Jones talks to Tamsin, the girl we see in the beginning, who tells him what happened with the nun and the sex and all that stuff. The detectives then decide to visit Duncan, who immediately calls Tamsin a bitch, and it goes swimmingly from there. He won't admit to smashing the windows or killing the nun, but then he starts calling people to threaten them to keep quiet. He even leads some bullying against Tamsin at school, but fortunately Sarah Barnaby happens to work at that school, convenient, and she puts a stop to it. She tells John that Duncan has been a problem for years. He even badly beat a student, but his wealthy father Mark hushed it up with a big donation. Duncan's mom, Lauren, goes straight to Father Behan for guidance over what she believes her son did. Behan argues with Julian about something she confessed but won't tell the police, then goes to his regular pub, where he rails about the nuns living like royalty and how it can't go on. Everybody stares at him, as they should. Julian tells Barnaby that the sex-watching nun was probably Thomas because she often wandered in the woods. Then he meets with Catherine's parents, who happen to be in town for vows, for a pint. They tell Barnaby that she was a happy child up until her 20s, and then she decided to become a nun for some reason. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that her dad is not her birth dad. Birth dad died when she was 2, and his surname happened to be Virtue. Oh, like the name of the priory and the whole village? The next day, Behan goes to Duncan to convince him to confess what's troubling him. When Duncan tells him no, he threatens to go to Mark. Later at his home, someone rings the doorbell. As soon as Behan can say, "Oh, hello," he's strangled to death.
Never answer the door.
Never say, "Oh, hello."
Never say, "What are you doing here?"
Never indicate that you know anyone ever at any time in Midsomer, and you probably will survive.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, tourist info, Eileen, can you let us know about Midsomer Virtue?
This is our first and only time in Midsomer Virtue. It has a lovely priory that if you're lucky enough to get to visit, or agile enough to scale a wall, you will enjoy its beautiful garden, a church with some stained glass windows, and a great place in the woods for date night. BYO weed!
Romance.
Or sex.
Yeah, which, by the way, Duncan had sex with his socks on.
So not so much romance.
Just the first indication that he's kind of a jerk. So, yeah, this whole episode is set in this priory, which I found interesting because it's one of the few occasions where you can see Barnaby can't power muscle his way through. Like, we're in charge. Where it's like, then he doesn't seem to want to fight with a nun.
No. And there is something about a nun, and I say this as growing up Catholic, that is intimidating. No matter what their order is. And these are full nun habit nuns. So they're even more intimidating.
Well, I mean, the stereotype is, a nun will beat you.
Well, yeah, they have the handy ruler.
That is, yeah. I don't know why Barnaby would be afraid of that, but no, I did kind of enjoy when he was like, "No, we're going to need to set up an incident room." Well, that's fine, but you need to follow our quiet hours. I'm not going to be quiet, so we'll go do it somewhere else.
Yeah, you have 25 minutes in the morning, 25 minutes in the evening, and that's kind of it,
So I think since this is clear, like a lot of the centers around the priory, it talks so much about taking vows and the rules of the order that we're going to do Eileen's History Corner at the top.
All right, here's 2,000 years of history condensed, so obviously very simplified. So Christianity arrived in Britain sometime in the 3rd century, but possibly earlier, and it was still a suppressed religious sect in the Roman Empire at that time, which Britain was then a part of. It became the state religion in 380. Specifically, the Edict of Thessalonica dictated that the Catholicism of Nicene Christians was the state church and condemned other Christian sects as heresy. That's all very complicated. That's all you really need to know. It became officially linked to the Holy See in 597. When the Romans left Britain in the 6th century, Britain became more isolated from the rest of Europe. Except for those pesky Vikings who started raiding coastal towns and monasteries in the late 8th century. Those monasteries were set up in the 6th and 7th centuries by missionaries, and they had lots of cool objects made of gold. The Vikings liked the gold, especially if it was easily portable. Heathens. But during the 900s, the Vikings began to convert to Christianity, mainly for practical reasons of trade. After a few centuries, the Vikings had pretty much intermarried with the Anglo-Saxons, and everyone was happily Roman Catholic, more or less. In 1154, an Englishman named Nicholas Breakspere became Pope Adrian IV. In 1170, Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, was murdered in his cathedral, a crime that was ultimately laid at the feet of King Henry II, who is rumored to have exclaimed, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" Though he probably didn't really say that. Canterbury Cathedral became a major pilgrimage site, which inspired Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. While things weren't always hunky-dory between the Catholic Church in England and the Holy See, things really took a turn for the worse when Henry VIII, who had previously been a staunch defender of the Catholic Church in the early days of the Reformation, got the hots for Anne Boleyn and the prospect of a male heir. More on that in a later episode. But the communion between the Catholic Church in England and Wales and the Holy See was broken in 1534. It was briefly restored by Queen Mary I in 1555 before being broken again by Elizabeth I. The Act of Supremacy of 1534 made the monarch head of the Church of England and prohibited the practice of Catholicism and any other sects that were now considered heretical. The Acts of Supremacy and Uniformity in 1558 and the Supremacy of the Crown Act in 1562 made it a crime to assert the authority of any foreign prince and an act of treason for a second refusal to take the oath of supremacy. You will not be tested on those dates. Elizabeth initially took a lenient stance toward Catholics in a sort of 16th century don't ask, don't tell policy. But Pope Pius V excommunicated her in 1570 and urged for her overthrow, which kind of pissed her off. It was then made high treason to be a Catholic, and the celebration of Mass was prohibited. The attempted invasion of the Catholic Spanish Armada and the subversive activities of the supporters of the Catholic Mary, Queen of Scots, as well as other plots and uprising, reinforced the connection of Catholicism with treason. When James I, the Protestant son of Mary, Queen of Scots, came to the English throne, any tolerance towards Catholics quickly ended with the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. However, James's son, Charles I, married a Catholic French princess, so anti-Catholic laws were rarely enforced. But he lost his head, and then came the very anti-Catholic Commonwealth of Oliver Cromwell. When Charles II was restored to the throne, his court, like his father's, was very tolerant of Catholics, and Charles is even rumored to have converted to Catholicism on his deathbed. In 1685, his brother, James II, became the first openly Catholic monarch of England since Mary I. James's two surviving daughters with his first wife had been raised Protestant and been married to Protestant princes, but his Catholic second wife managed to have a male heir born in 1688. This led to the Glorious Revolution, which overthrew James II in favor of his daughter, who became Mary II, and her husband, the Prince of Orange, who became William III. James II's son, James, known as the Old Pretender, and his grandson, Charles, known as the Young Pretender, continued to press their claim to the throne until Bonnie Prince Charlie's defeat at the Battle of Culloden in 1745. In 1701, the Act of Settlement disqualified non-Protestants from holding the throne and established the line of succession through a German line in Hanover descended from James I, through his daughter Elizabeth. The population of Catholics in England declined from 4% in 1700 to 1% in 1800, and their civil rights were severely curtailed. They could not vote, and their property rights were very limited. Starting in 1778, the Catholic Relief Acts allowed Catholics who swore an oath of allegiance to own property, inherit land, join the army, and for priests to operate openly. Naturally, this led to riots. But permanent missions were set up at that time, and the numbers of Catholics began to increase. During the French Revolution, thousands of French Catholics fled to England, and with Ireland becoming an official part of the United Kingdom, more relief acts were passed, granting Catholics more rights. By 1829, they were allowed to vote and hold most public offices. During the Great Famine, thousands of Irish fled not only to America, but also to Great Britain. In 1850, the Pope created 12 dioceses in England. The early 20th century continued to see growth in English Catholicism, representing 9.6% of the population by 2021, bolstered again by Catholic immigration, this time from Central Europe. In 2013, the Act of Settlement was revised to eliminate the disqualification of anyone marrying a Catholic from the line of succession.
So, that's a lot.
It is a lot. And that was very condensed.
Yeah, no, I mean, Catholic history is just not, even in England is a a lot.
Yeah, it's long and complicated.
Yes. And we could barely do it justice in a few short minutes.
Yeah. But it does impact a lot of the, not just this episode, but it does impact a lot of the other episodes that we will be discussing.
I mean, it's got long shadows throughout English history.
Yeah.
Nuns and priests and monks have all played have had a long role in mysteries too. Everything from Umberto Eco's Name of the Rose to Codifel, Father Brown, Father Dowling. Nuns in mysteries have started to make sort of as detectives have started to make more of a resurgence lately.
Yeah, there's a Sister Agatha series that is set in New Mexico, written by Amy Thurlow. And then Sister Boniface is a spinoff from Father Brown. So that's set in England. So those are two very current ones. Also, nuns are a convenient disguise for murderers, either male or female, because it does give you something that is anonymous. It's easy to find, as Joan says. You can find one in any fancy dress shop, or as they say over here, costume store. And people notice the habit, not the woman, which is, of course, the point of it. You notice the habit, not the woman.
Yep.
And so it's like, yeah, I saw a nun go in and stab this man 20 times, and like, okay.
And they do a lot of like sort of I found it interesting. This was like the order was only like 3 or 4 people at the start. Like nobody, that nobody wants to be a nun nowadays.
Yeah. Though there's, with the rise of Catholicism in England, I think Catherine might get lucky in recruiting a few more young nuns.
I found Catherine's character interesting. It was very, very upper class. Very. It reminded me of that sort of sense of like when back in the day, the aristocracy. One you had a couple extra sons. One was sent to go be a priest. You had a couple, or a bishop. You had a couple extra daughters. One was going to go to the convent.
Yeah. It was kind of a convenient way for women who didn't want to get married, who may not have liked men, or were lesbian, to not have to get married, because basically those were your options. You became a nun, you became a wife.
Yeah. Now I was also raised Catholic, but I was not sent to like religious schools. I don't have a lot of experience with the nuns that I remember meeting were not the full on habit nuns. They were more of the kind that would go out in the world and such.
I had 12 years of CCD classes, but I did not go to Catholic school.
Okay.
But I did, most of the nuns that were associated with the churches that I went to were either in just a very basic habit or wore street clothes.
Did they have the male names like they did? Like that was kind of perplexing to me. It was like Jerome, Julian, Tom. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. No, and I see that actually a lot in pop culture, like Sister Act and Nonsense and stuff like that, where they give nuns male name, or the nuns take male names more often than I have seen in real life. Most of them are like Sister Mary Margaret, Sister Agatha, Sister.
Yeah, you also mentioned to me that you saw the name Mother, like them all being mothers, sort of jumped out to you.
Yeah, that seemed weird to me because, from my understanding, the term mother was only used for the head of the convent or the priory or the order, whatever, and everybody else was a sister. So I was very confused by the fact that they were all called mother.
Yeah. Okay, on the count of 3, we're gonna both say the name of our favorite nun in this episode. All right, let's see if they match.
Oh gosh.
Ready? There's only 4 of them. Don't.
I know. I know.
One of them didn't last the first 15 minutes.
Okay. All right.
3, 2, 1. Jerome.
Yeah. Though I love Julian and Catherine for very different reasons. Especially I love the growth of Catherine through the episode, because she seems very mild and meek at the beginning, and then by the end, Yeah.
I just like Jerome because she was like, mm-hmm. She would make lots of sassy eye rolls. That bit where she was like, "You want that chicken strangled? Just bring it here." While she's sitting in the wheelchair that she doesn't need.
Yeah. Yes, there was something kind of imperious in the way she was wheeled around.
Mm-hmm. I thought there was some weird scenes of the Priory. Number one, when they're eating dinner and Catherine is reading the Bible passage, and then she just starts breaking down. So they're like, Mother Julian's like tags in.
Yeah.
and lets Catherine go sob in her soup.
That was probably fairly authentic, I would think.
Yeah.
That they do tag team during reading the Bible during meals.
Yeah. And I just thought, and also I just like when Mother Thomas is checking on the hen house and there's a fox. They intersplice like a fox that might be like in the like fox in the hen house, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Not super subtle. I also have to say in the first opening bit, when Duncan and his friends, you just think it's one or two guys scaling the wall. Next thing you know, it's like a clown car of teenagers just scaling a wall. All of them wearing, like, where did they get those masks? Like
those weird rubber masks. They use those in a lot of like thrillers and things, and they can't be cheap.
Well, it's I thought it was like an homage to like a teenager's homage to Point Break, where it's a group of bank robbers like wear presidential rubber masks and they call the ex-presidents. I saw the Queen.
Yeah, she was easy to.
I saw Sean Connery, like 60s Sean Connery.
Yeah, I thought I saw him. I thought one looked like, at the time, Prince Charles, now King Charles III. Mm-hmm. And there was some guy that it looked a bit Guy Fawkes, but not completely.
Yeah, like they went by so fast, it was hard to really see. I just was like, man, there's a lot of kids that just want to go break windows.
Yeah, I tried freezing the frames and I still couldn't identify some of them. Some of them may be like some British footballer that I would have no clue who they were anyway.
Or British, like older British actor.
Yeah, Tony Blair kind of thing. Well, I would know what Tony Blair looked like. But.
And there was no real strange kills in this episode unless strangulation is strange to Midsomer.
Not particularly.
No,
especially according to Agatha Christie, she has lots of people getting strangled.
Now, maybe it was strangled with like, dental floss. That would probably be Midsomer.
And that would be some really heavy duty dental floss.
That's with the wax. All right, shall we jump into the cast highlights?
All right.
Off the bat, we have Fiona Glascott. She played sister, then mother Catherine. She hails from Ireland, so is it any surprise she appeared in Ballykiss Angel? She also appeared in The Bill, Foyle's War, A Touch of Frost, episodes, Goldfish Memory, and This Is My Father. Now, her biggest role is she plays the young Minerva McGonagall in the Fantastic Beasts spin-off movies from the Harry Potter franchise. This is a role originally played by Dame Maggie Smith in the films, and apparently this is controversial because some fans believe the character hadn't been born yet at the time of those films. Yet she's seen teaching in Hogwarts, and to that I say, nerds.
It's not like J.K. Rowling didn't write these scripts or have a vast input into them. I think she knows how old she is.
Are you saying that people on the internet would argue with someone who created the who would think they I'm sure it's a large group of, I don't know, white men? Currently, Glascott can be seen as famous cookbook editor Judith Jones in the show Julia. Susan Sheridan was our gone too soon Mother Thomas Aquinas. She was primarily a voice actress with a number of prominent roles like Noddy in the children's show Noddy's Toyland Adventures, Moomin in the Moomin cartoon, Princess Sylvia in Muzzy in Gondoland, and Princess Eilonwy, I'm probably not saying that right, in Disney's adaptation of The Black Cauldron. Now, Douglas Adams superfans are going to know her as the original voice of Trillian in the BBC radio version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which of course led to the best-selling book series. Now, as a teen in the early 60s, she attended the Queen's Maid School, Windsor, which was a Catholic school attached to a convent formed by the Brigidine sisters. This might have gone into her performance, one of her few live-action roles. Sadly, she passed away in 2015.
Jamie Blackley played teenage dirtbag Duncan Hendred. This role was early in his career. His first major appearance was as Hanshed in the London production of Spring Awakening in 2009. After Midsomer, he appeared in Snow White and the Huntsman, the pilot of Endeavour, Irrational Man, Slaughterhouse Rules with a Z, The Halcyon, Traitors, The Last Kingdom, and most recently, Becoming Elizabeth. He won the award for Best Performance in a British feature film at the Edinburgh International Film Festival for his lead role in Unwanted Me to Kill Him, which is all capitals, and the 2 is the number 2.
I think it's You Wanted Me. You wanted me to kill him?
You wanted me to kill him? Okay. It's very... Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that is how they spell it, so...
Well, his biggest role was the romantic lead in the film If I Want. In an interview promoting the film, he was asked if he was as romantic as his character. He responded, "I've written a song before, once about someone." No, it wasn't. It was about that fish from Finding Nemo, Dory. It was called Dory. It's very romantic. That's very weird.
Shades of Troy McClure.
Emma Davies was worried mom and speedrunner Lauren Hendred. She got into acting because her father was the actor Jeffrey Davies, best known for the Doctor in the House series of shows. Her first acting job was at the age of 18 months on the show The Fen Street Gang. I'm sure she had a lot of lines. Her career took off as a teen when she appeared on the show Boone. In 2008, she joined the show Emmerdale as the character Anna D'Souza. However, she had to leave the show just months later because the actors who played her father, brother, and fiancé all left the show. Apparently they didn't want to leave her alone without a family. She also appeared in Doctors, Holby City, Funny Woman, Father Brown, and will appear in the new season of Ted Lasso, which just started. Yay! Her adult dirtbag husband, Matthew Hendred, was played by George Irving. According to his own website, he is best known for his role as Anton Meyer, one of the original cast members on Holby City. He appeared in 67 episodes. He's also appeared in The Sweeney, Inspector Morse, Coronation Street, The Tudors, Moving On, and most recently in The Queens of Mystery. Michael Colgan was the not-so-bright Father Bean. He's from Northern Ireland and studied at l'École Internationale de Théâtre Jacques Lelong in Paris. He's performed with the Royal Shakespeare Company, most notably in the 2009 King Lear with Pete Postlethwaite. On screen, he appeared in This Is Not a Love Song, Raw, The Thick of It, The Fall, What Remains, Chernobyl, Marcella, and This Is England. He's also published 2 novels under his birth name, Michael Hughes.
Martha McIntosh was unlucky in love, Tamsin Bickford. She's a Nepo baby, the daughter of actors Stephen McIntosh and Lisa Jacobs. I kid. She's very talented. She's best known for her recurring role as Katie Johnson in Stella, the Ruth Jones comedy. She's also appeared in Brimstone, New Tricks, What Remains, and Game of Thrones. Oh, no, wait. She's in the video game version of Game of Thrones, playing a character named Mira Forrester. She does a lot of video game work like Dark Souls 3, The Pillars of the Earth, and Elden Ring. And this is the first time I knew there was a video game based on Pillars of the Earth, the Ken Follett novel.
I did not know that either.
Hannah Arterton appeared as pub server Katie, a role so small they didn't give her a last name. This is only her second credit, but she's had a healthy career since then. She's had recurring roles in Atlantis, The Peripheral, Safe, and The Five. In 2018, she appeared in a horror film called The Convent. IMDb describes the plot as, during the 17th century, a young woman is saved from execution and led to a priory to repent her sins, but discovers a greater evil lies within. So she can't really escape the nuns. Oh, and her sister is the actress Gemma Arterton, who you might have seen in Quantum of Solace or The Kingsmen, although she's never been on Midsomer, so I don't know who that is. Cliff Parisi is pub owner Barry, also no last name, you lazy writers. He started his career as a stand-up comic who got his acting break in the film Queen of Hearts. His two most recognizable roles are as Minty Peterson on EastEnders and Fred Buckle on Call the Midwife. He was also a cast member on the 19th season of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, but he was the third one to leave. Wah wah. Philip Anthony was Peter De Winter. Who's that? That was the silver dealer. Blinky to miss him. Anthony was a journeyman British character actor whose first credit was all the way back in 1959 in a show called Emergency Ward 10. He went on to roles in Doctor Who, The Avengers, Poirot, Bergerac, Inspector Morse, and Doctors. He passed away in 2020.
Richard Walsh played stepdad George Norrington. He's best known for his role as Bert Sicknote Quigley on the long-running TV show London's Burning, which I guess is the British equivalent of Chicago Fire. He recently appeared in Genius and The Crown. Josh Paris had his very first role in his one scene as Duncan's school chum Callum. His career has started to move in the last few years. He appeared in A Confession, The Outlaws, The Suspect, and the new series Rain Dogs. Playing young Mother Julian in a small cameo role was Zoe Lister. She's best known for playing the role Zoe Carpenter for years on Hollyoaks. From the character's Wikipedia entry, Zoe has been involved in storylines including being stalked, entering a relationship with an older man, having sexual relations with her female best friend, and being the victim of a stabbing. Lister's portrayal saw her nominated for the Sexiest Female award at the 2008 British Soap Awards, and also attracted critical praise for her exit storyline, which is too complicated to explain here.
It is technically more complicated than the history of Christianity. We have a few return visitors this week. Rosalind Knight was our sassy Mother Jerome. She also appeared in the episode Birds of Prey. Now, her career spanned 70 years. She started in the theater, and then in film, she had an uncredited role in Olivier's Richard III, all the way back in 1955. Her first credited film role was in Blue Murder in St. Trinian's in 1957. Since then, she appeared in two Carry-On films, the classic Tom Jones, Nicholas Nickleby, Coronation Street, Jeeves and Wooster, Mapp and Lucia, Only Fools and Horses, Prick Up Your Ears, About a Boy, and The Crown. She passed away in 2020. Jessica Turner was Delia Norrington. She also appeared in Death's Shadow. She's had roles in Prime Suspect, All or Nothing at All, Dr. Finlay, Poltergeists, Father Brown, The Ottoman Lieutenant, and Tests of the D'Urbervilles with Gemma Arterton. Still don't know who that is. Hugh Ross was Spilling the Tea Bishop Graves. He's also in The Dogleg Murders. Now, Hugh is a Scottish actor whose career is all over the place, starting in 1969 as the role of Youth in Dr. Finlay's Casebook. He appeared in General Hospital. I believe the American General Hospital. Tycoon, Clive Barker's Nightbreed in a very prominent role, if you remember that whacked out horror film. The Harrison Ford feature Patriot Games, Between the Lines, Ab Fab, Shackleton, Hannibal Rising, and he's most recently been a recurring character, Archbug on Outlander. I don't watch Outlander, so I don't know how you say that.
I think it's Arch because I think it's short for Archibald, but I'm a few seasons behind.
Okay. Chris Wilson has an uncredited role as police officer. Now, he is a professional background actor and a stand-in or body double for, according to his own IMDb, a number of A-list actors. Now, when you look him up on the Midsomer wiki, he's listed as being in at least 50 to 60 episodes of Midsomer. Now, that number puts him in more episodes than pretty much everyone else except for John Nettles, Neil Dudgeon, Barry Jackson, Jane Wymark, and maybe Fiona Dolman. Like, he might edge out Fiona Dolman if these are all accurate. However, since most of these are uncredited, how are we supposed to know if this is true?
I don't know. Now we have a village star, and this week it is Joanna David who played Mother Julian. She's also a return visitor. She appeared in the episode Written in Blood. She hails from Lancaster, appearing in her first major TV role in a 1971 production of Sense and Sensibility. She went on to roles in War and Peace, Ballet Shoes, Rebecca, Bleak House, Miss Marple, Foyle's War, Rogue Trader, Pride and Prejudice, and You Will Meet a Tall, Dark Stranger. Most recently, she appeared in The House of the Dragon as Lady Jocelyn Redwine. Joanna is also a linchpin in a big British acting family. She's been with the actor and Midsomer murderer Edward Fox since 1971. You know, you need a whole diagram for the Fox family, the Fox acting family. She's the mom of Amelia Fox and Freddie Fox, both successful actors in their own right. And in fun fact, in 1990, she appeared as a contestant on the game show Cluedo, which for U.S. listeners is what they call the game Clue, competing against Edward. Murder really keeps the spark alive. So romantic.
It is. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to be right back with the second half of A Sacred Trust. And we're back. Let's look at the second half of A Sacred Trust.
The Bishop of Midsomer's inside. He's holding a special mass for Father Bean. I've arranged for us to have 5 minutes with him when he's finished.
Did you really need me for that? It's not as if he's a suspect, is it?
What? I just thought...
Yeah, all right, Jones. Any results from fingerprints?
Yes. Just Lauren Hendricks. Hey, what you call a bishop, by the way?
Is this another one of your jokes?
No.
Your Excellency. And remember to genuflect.
What does that mean?
The prioress is shocked by the news of Behan's murder. She has no alibi because she was alone trying to figure out the finances, which apparently had been Mother Thomas's job. But then why does she bury a suitcase the following night? Catherine doesn't have an alibi either. She admits quite openly she's the virtue heir and would get the land back if all the nuns left the grounds. But that's why she became a nun, to ensure that the priory would continue. The bishop comes to town to say mass for the dead priest. He tells them that Behan was a decent man, just not popular. Or smart. He made mistakes and was pompous and meddled in things he didn't understand. Hey, I don't think the bishop liked him very much.
I don't think so.
Jones searches Duncan's room for drugs and finds a big old bag of weed. Dad said he's happy to turn his son in so he can be prosecuted and maybe get straightened out. Mom, on the other hand, runs out the back door with a go bag of clothes and money and tells Duncan to get away.
I just want to know how she had that ready.
Well, it might have something to do with the fact that Dad, when he finds out, calls her stupid and pathetic. I guess that's where Duncan gets his charm with the ladies.
Mm-hmm.
The wrong people are getting murdered in this episode. Still, Duncan isn't that bright, and they find him pretty quickly. He admits the drugs were his and that he smashed the windows, but he denies killing anyone and says that the priest believed he was the murderer and threatened to snitch him out to his dad. Jones, apparently angling for cost and MVP this episode, next finds the missing silver at a local dealer. But it turns out the silver wasn't stolen. Mother Thomas sold them for the £60,000 on the day she was murdered to get the priory some much-needed cash. With all this evidence and clues staring him in the face, Barnaby finally has his eureka moment and says this case is all about clothes and masks. He goes back to the priory and pulls Julian out of prayers, telling her it's time to confess. Here's the reveal. Julian was the nun that caught Duncan and Tamsin having sex. When she saw Duncan's face, she recognized him. Or his face, anyways, because it's the same face of her father when he was a young mercenary who helped slaughter an African village. Julian was a witness to it while working there as a missionary and never forgot the face of the man leading the charge. When she saw Duncan, she knew he could help her finally get justice. So she stole his pants, and more importantly, his idea in his pants that had his address. She put on the clothes she wore when she first came to the priory in the 70s and walked into the village until she found their house. She threatened Matthew with exposure unless he used part of his wealth from his private security company to aid a charity for war victims. She clearly didn't think this through, though, because Matthew just went out the following night and murdered Thomas by mistake because one nun with glasses in the dark is the same as any other. She told all this to Behan in confession, but never actually used real names. So Behan thought Duncan was the killer. Now, he attempted to talk to Matthew about it, but Matthew, thinking the priest knew the truth, killed him. Oops. However, the lack of any tangible evidence for any of this means this is going to be a long, hard road to prosecute Matthew. Now, the prioress decides, the hell with that, and takes matters into her own hands. She calls Matthew and says, "Surprise, dummy, you killed the wrong nun," and demands the money. She then calls Barnaby and tells him what she did. Matthew creeps back onto the grounds that night, and when he sees who he believes is Mother Julian, he tries to strangle her. Surprise! The nun flips Matthew to the ground as Costume Popo swarms in and arrests him for murder. Turns out the nun was actually Jones, looking fetching in a habit.
So lovely.
You really just want to talk a lot about Jones in a nun's habit, don't you?
I think it's just one of those iconic things when he scenes when he turns around and it's Jones, and John Barnaby takes the picture with his cell phone.
Yeah. Well, Barnaby couldn't have flipped over Matthew.
Jones is a strong Welshman.
Yep. So the killer. Let's talk about that reveal, because it comes out of left field.
Yeah, you needed more backstory than you got initially to really suss it out.
Yeah. The clues, and in fairness, Barnaby puts it together with just it's straight intuition, because he's like, well, she said she was a missionary in Africa and he had African art on his walls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Africa's a really big continent.
Yeah. So, and they had a lot of red herrings in this episode, but I guess I just feel like a lot of times, most episodes, Midsomer is Playfair. You can figure, you might be able to figure it out or guess from but this one, I think there was absolutely just no way. There's no way the audience would have felt, I think, could have figured this out on their own.
Yeah. I do like that there was a variation on the formula at the end where the reveal doesn't end it. It's the now how do we catch him that ends the show. So true. I did like that part of it. But
also, I point out a couple things. The nun could have told the nun, especially after the murder of Mother Thomas, could have told all of this to Barnaby.
Yeah.
And she didn't, and Behan ends up murdered.
Yeah.
When Behan ends up murdered, she still doesn't tell him.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem too fussed by it. Doesn't seem too racked by guilt or any of the, she could have helped bring this to a close a lot sooner.
Yeah, that is true.
But then again, she does sort of take the matters, and I think she does try to atone for it at the end by taking matters in her own hand and setting the guy up again.
Mm-hmm. I have a feeling that Catherine, or Athenaeus, as she becomes at the end, is going to be ruling that roost in no time.
Yeah. I also kind of felt like there's that scene where you see her at the end, the detectives leaves and she sort of shuts the door and watches them go. And I'm like, she's straight up killing those last two nuns and just getting the land, isn't she?
Well, apparently they have to have two. So I think Mother Julian might eat a bad bit of something from the garden. But she did seem to like Jerome.
It was a lovely funeral for Mother Thomas. Although, did you notice that when I think Mother Jerome throws a flower onto the grave, it lands with a thud.
It is a bit of a thud. I have a feeling that was enhanced in post-production by the Foley people. Is that who they're called?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I also that's what flowers sound like. They sound like, when you if you threw a spoon on wood.
Yeah.
And nobody really liked poor Father Behan.
No.
The church doesn't send its best and its brightest. There's one serious thing. It very quietly talks about the sort of that cycle of abuse and abusiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew clearly is clearly very dominating and abusive father. Look at how he treats his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Duncan apparently is just craving his father's approval, craving his acceptance, but also learned of all the disgusting things that Duncan kind of does in this episode. Well, not disgusting, but a lot of the stuff he does can just be chalked up to the stupidity of youth. Mm-hmm. The bullying of Tamsin,
that was brutal. Yeah,
that cruel. Having all his friends call her a slag, and I will say the one thing I'm kind of upset by the show is we never see him either kind of pay for that, and we never see Tamsin's full reaction to it, which I think it really could have used it just a second of showing like the effect of this on her. But when Sarah calls him out, and I think this is a wonderful job the actor did, Duncan has just a sociopath look on his face. It's like, you're a woman. I don't really care what you think. And he just walks away because she has a little bit of a power that it's clear he does not respect anything she's saying.
Yeah. He seems afraid of his father. He does seem to love his mother in some sort of way. But
she does hand him a bag of clothes and money.
Yeah. She did have a go bag ready for him.
Yep.
And he uses women and girls since he's a school
stud.
Yeah. But his reaction to Sarah calling him out is totally in character and would be what that kind of kid would do. And he's going to grow up and he's going to be, if not physically abusive, emotionally and verbally abusive to his spouse or spouses, because I can't imagine him having one for very long. So it's just going to be a cycle that goes through it. I don't think he's going to learn. And maybe Tamsin will join the convent to get away from men.
Oof. We actually do see a fair bit of detective work this episode.
Yeah.
Jones doing a ton of legwork. He tracks down the silver dealer. He basically helps track down Duncan. He tracks down Tamsin. He gets kind of the pieces together that helps Barnaby put it together. That was a strong Jones episode, even with him in the nun habit.
Yes. His interview with Tamsin, I thought, was very nicely done. It's very sensitive. I don't think if John Barnaby would have been able to get the information out of her. Jones met her on as who she is as a teenage girl with a lot of sensitivity. And I thought that was very good. And I think that's something he learned a lot actually from Tom, because Tom had a really great way of interacting with younger people in many episodes.
Although I will say, it's like that scene where you see Jones just walking up to a group of teen girls getting off the bus. And I'm just like, I'd be like, how are they not macing him? Who's this weirdo coming up to me? Excuse me, girls, can I ask you questions about people having sex?
He's more of a one-on-one guy.
Yeah. I liked also the dynamic between Barnaby and Jones, like the especially like Jones trying to humanize John with the jokes and finding like those little bits in there. I enjoyed that, the kind of the running gag of like, is this a joke?
Yeah. This is the first season still of John Barnaby, but it's the 7th in it. And they are still working their way around each other, but Jones is obviously getting more comfortable with it. He's still learning the dynamic, still feeling him out, but he's realizing he can make the jokes, but John isn't always going to get them or appreciate them, but he's more relaxed than he was earlier in this season.
Yeah, it's definitely the chemistry was getting better.
Yeah.
With them, and they were finding good humor, good moments of humor. I really liked it. Other detective, we actually see people getting fingerprinted. We actually see them fingerprinting the nuns, which I thought was kind of an interesting choice.
Yeah. You don't always see the nuts and bolts stuff unless they're in the background while the coroner is giving their info dump.
I also kind of like that, like Barnaby and maybe the writers just like don't know what the technical term. Like, I don't know what the technical term for the people that come out and fingerprint you. I'm pretty sure it's not fingerprint guys.
I don't know. I was fingerprinted because I had my house broken into, but
did they find out that you did it?
They never got back with me. Yeah. But they didn't take anything of worth either, so.
Yeah. Speaking of the tech guys, let's jump into like corner because we have Tamsin, corner Tamsin, or corner Kate's in this episode. Doesn't get to do a lot. She has a little bit of a conversation with John about how going to Catholic school made her an atheist.
I'm there with you.
Yeah. But I gotta say, is like you can clearly see that this is like this. It's like around. It was like this season, the previous seasons, around the time they were like trying to do more CSI style lab work. So you see the tech guys all in the masks and the paper suits with the paper shoes. And I think, oh, that looks really great until you see that Kate's not bothering to wear a mask, which would be a no-no. Barnaby and Jones just stomping through the whole thing because Barnaby's is like, no way Neil Dudgeon is like, no way I'm putting on that paper suit.
He does put on the booties, though.
But it was just like, so what's the point of the lab tech guys doing? Because the crime scene's completely contaminated when they do that.
Well, I think maybe at that point they'd realize that they'd gotten all they needed or whatever. Who knows?
It was just sort of like, come on.
Yeah.
How
about a little home life?
Yeah, it's not a lot of Sarah this time. The characters, the kids involved work at or go to the school that Sarah works at, which, tad convenient. She can give sort of an info dump about Duncan that technically I think violates probably a lot of school rules.
Probably.
What did you think of her little jab at John?
I loved it. As someone who grew up, as a female who grew up Catholic, you do kind of think, would I become a nun? And you think, well, it will be quieter than dealing with guys all the time. But then you realize, I can just, live on my own and have a bunch of cats. Not that I'm a crazy cat lady now.
Sure.
There's only 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think 3 is the level for crazy cat lady.
Yeah. Not crazy cat, but had a funny little Sykes moment in the episode where he's like, John is towards the end. John is walking Sykes in the park and trying to deal with the Mother Julian on the phone, and Sykes is just on. Did you think Sykes was going to find something there?
You thought that there might be something more going on there, but he didn't find anything, and it was just Sykes being Sykes.
I was like, is this where they buried? Like, I was thinking, did they bury the suitcase here or something? It just was like, it just seemed like a weird thing that they were leading to, but it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a little confused by the guy who, at the very beginning, who came to the priory.
That's the silver dealer.
And it took me a while when we saw him again. Oh yeah, that guy. It was like, okay, that did come around again, because it was like, I couldn't remember I'd watched these all a long time ago, and then I always watch 2 times before we record, and I could not remember who that was, and was like, who is that guy? And then I remembered that he was the silver dealer.
I mean, that's why I put it in the notes. Is just like he is kind of like a blink. Oh yeah, he was in there before. It's like, oh, and he was in there. Like, you forget because it's such a thing that like you didn't need him have him in there at all.
Actually, I think it was kind of cool that they did kind of have him and then called back to him later. So he didn't come out of nowhere.
True, but it was all red hair. I point out it's a minor red herring that they dispense with pretty quickly. It's like, no, here's the bill of sale. But they still had to hire, cast, and pay an actor.
They were flush with money that year.
Yeah. So, what's your final thoughts on this episode?
Well, I do want to point out that I think this episode has the single most normal, well-adjusted character in all of Midsomer, and that is Catherine's stepfather.
He's probably a serial killer. You know that, right?
He is not. He is the single most well-adjusted character in all of Midsomer.
You're really just holding on to hope so you don't have to go to a nunnery, right?
I don't think they take me anymore. I enjoy this episode. I think there's enough variation on the theme to make it interesting, variation on the formula. And I like the strong characters. I think it has some really strong female characters in it. The nuns obviously are very forceful in their own way. And Sarah has that really great forceful moment with Duncan. And so I enjoy this one. It's not a top episode, but I think it's a good strong one, a good strong B+.
It's a solid episode. I'm not crazy about where they just kind of like sandbag you with the solution that there's no way you could have gotten. But I thought it was an interesting solution, and it's like all of a sudden it's just like, oh, that's a horrific situation. Like the flashback to the village being slaughtered is kind of horrific, and it gives we've talked about like this is not really a rip from the headlines sort of show, but it gives this an almost like a ripped from the headlines sort of feel. It's just it just kind of comes in at the last minute.
I think if they had made some mentions earlier, if there had been like some kind of reference or even some pictures of her in an African village as a missionary, if there had been more than her just saying I was a missionary. She doesn't even say where she was a missionary. If there had been a little bit more of that, this would have been, I think, a really top episode. It does come out of nowhere. I also am always a little bothered by people who can recognize people after seeing them once after decades, because basically and that may be a little bit of face blindness on my part, but
it was a horrific situation.
I can never remember anybody's face.
But this is it would be a traumatic situation.
Yeah,
you might. That said, good Jones Barnaby interplay. I think the nuns are interesting enough that it keeps us entertained. It's a solid B episode. So I would it's a solid B episode. Well, that's everything we wanted to talk about this week. We want to thank you all for listening. If you had anything you wanted to discuss about A Sacred Trust or Midsomer Murders, please email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. If you want us to use the email in the show, you just have to say so in your email. We're also Welcome to Midsomer on Facebook and Instagram. So if you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing to us or rating and reviewing us in iTunes. It really helps people find us. Also, tell all your friends about us. We'll be back next month, so we hope you will join us again as we take the road out of Midsomer. We want to thank you for listening and remind you that in Midsomer, talking to nuns can be murder.
You have no idea.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act Fair Use Exception for criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art was designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space.